There was another lesson God was teaching me through trading that I did not recognize at first. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about strategy. It wasn't even about discipline. It was about learning how to stand. When most people look at a trading chart, they see numbers, they see candles, they see percentages, they see profit and loss. What I began to see was battle, not because the market was evil, but because every decision required conviction. Every decision required courage, every decision required discipline, and every decision required me to confront myself. One of the things I learned very quickly was that fear is expensive. Fear costs money. Fear costs peace. Fear costs opportunities. Fear costs confidence. When fear entered a trade, I second-guessed myself. I moved my stops. I abandoned my strategy. I exited too early. I chased too late. I violated my own rules. Fear never improved my trading. It only exposed my lack of trust. The same thing was happening in my walk with God. The battles I was facing were teaching me something. Every time fear appeared, I had a choice. Would I retreat or would I stand? The market taught me that nobody can stand for me, nobody can execute my trade for me, nobody can manage my risk for me, nobody can hold my position for me. At some point, I have to decide. At some point, I have to commit. At some point, I have to stand behind my conviction. And that lesson began spilling over into every area of my life. The more I walked with God, the more I realized that faith is not passive. Faith stands. Faith waits. Faith endures. Faith holds its position when everything around it is telling it to run. The scripture says, "Is greater than watch ye, stand fast in the faith, quit you like men, be strong." 1 Corinthians 16:13. For a long time, I thought spiritual maturity meant avoiding conflict, avoiding battles, avoiding resistance. But that is not what I was learning. I was learning that some things must be confronted, some territory must be defended, some agreements must be rejected, some lies must be challenged, some gates must be held. There were times in trading when every emotion in me wanted to close the trade. Nothing had changed. My strategy was intact, my analysis was intact, the structure was intact. Yet fear was screaming, and if I listened to fear, I lost. Not because the market beat me, because I abandoned my position. I began seeing the same thing spiritually. The enemy does not always need to destroy a person. Sometimes he only needs them to surrender ground, to abandon territory, to relinquish what God has already given them, to retreat. That realization changed something inside me. I stopped seeing myself merely as someone trying to survive. I began seeing myself as someone learning to stand, not in my own strength, not in my own wisdom, not in my own discipline, but in God. The scripture says, "Is greater than, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might." Ephesians 6:10. Not my might, his might. Not my strength, his strength. Not my authority, his authority. That distinction changed everything. Because the warrior God was teaching me to become was not self-reliant. The warrior God was teaching me to become was dependent. Dependent on his wisdom. Dependent on his timing, dependent on his guidance, dependent on his protection. And strangely enough, the market became one of the classrooms where he taught me that lesson. Every chart, every trade, every victory, every loss, every mistake, every breakthrough. They were all teaching me the same thing. Stand, trust God, hold your position, do not surrender to fear, do not abandon truth, do not retreat from what God has shown you. Because sometimes the greatest victory is not advancing. Sometimes the greatest victory is simply refusing to move. And without realizing it, God was preparing me for another revelation entirely. A revelation hidden in the lives of David's mighty men. Men who knew how to stand. Men who knew how to hold territory. Men who knew how to defend what had been entrusted to them. Men whose stories would eventually help me understand the battles I was facing in a way I never could have imagined.